And we are with Margaret Flowers and Kevin Zeese. They're co-directors of popularresistance.org, and their story is worth listening to, so please listen to the end of this clip because this is all very valuable information if you are concerned about your civil rights, about our foreign policy even, like the people's right to self-determination, sovereignty, wonderful concepts, but also if you're an American and you want to preserve your right to protest, you better listen in because this is serious stuff. Now, I want you guys to please give us all like a brief introduction of who you guys are, what have you done, and what was the reason why you got involved into something as serious as being now under
federal prosecution.
Yeah, federal prosecution
by the Trump administration.
Yes, like this is serious, a serious situation for you guys.
Don't we look scary?
No, you look pretty harmless, but I think that if this weren't to turn out as good as we want it to, because we want to help you guys out, we want everybody to pitch in $1, and then we will put a link in the description to let everybody know how they can help you guys with the court fees and all that. But also, should, like God forbid, should something terrible happen, we're looking at political prisoners, something that every day you hear people from the other side saying that those that want to just stamp a lot of criticisms saying that, nobody is charged for their political ideas. But we know that is not the case here because it is one of the reasons why you guys aren't even allowed then to talk about politics at the court, as I understand. But please just tell us.
Let's start from the beginning.
Yes, let's start from the beginning.
Basically, just who we are. So I have 3 young adult children. I'm a pediatrician by training. I did my training at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, and I practiced pediatrics for 17 years. And I left that in 2007 to try to change the healthcare system because we have a very problematic healthcare system in the United States. And that led into a whole lot of other activism and advocacy work. And so we co-direct Popular Resistance together. And we work on a whole variety of different issues. And we can talk about why we were there, but maybe we should say...
I'm an attorney, and I practiced criminal law in the 1980s. I have 2 adult sons and 1 daughter-in-law. I practiced criminal law, and I saw the injustice in the criminal justice system. A lot of injustice. And I handled small marijuana cases, defending drug cases, and I also worked on changing drug laws and ending the marijuana war and mass incarceration and racist police enforcement. So that's the kind of background I have.
Wonderful.
And the Popular Resistance came out of the Occupy movement. We helped to organize the Occupy movement in Washington, D.C. When that was over, we got together with other people who were organizing Occupy, other people working on other issues. We decided, what do we do to keep the movement going? Yeah. And that's where Popular Resistance came from.
Right. And so we were in Venezuela in March on a peace delegation from the United States. Kevin had been there the year before for the election when Nicolas Maduro was reelected as the president.
There was really an election. He actually is not a dictator. He won an election.
It was praised.
It was a better run election than elections in the United States.
Yeah, so we were there. And of course, in January, there was the whole thing where Juan Guaido said, "I'm the president of Venezuela," and the United States and all the allies of the U.S. immediately recognized him. But when we were there in Venezuela, he was a joke, really. They made fun of him. He would call a protest and very few people would show up. But we saw the United States actually handing over Venezuelan assets to Juan Guaido and his people. They handed over a UN consulate in New York to his people. They handed over military attaché buildings in D.C. This is a violation of international law. Of course, he's not the president. He has, no power. And
it's one thing when U.S. has a coup and they win and a new government comes in. Well, then, of course, the embassies and the missions, they all get transferred to the new government. But U.S. has a coup and loses, then gives the property to the real government, takes it from the real government, gives it to the fake government. That's what we're facing with the United States.
So that was very distressing that the U.S. was achieving this new level of lawlessness. And when those properties were being handed over, people that we knew, activists, were going to those properties and trying to stop them, but they were on the outside. There was nothing they could do. So when we knew that the U.S. was getting ready to hand over Venezuela's main embassy in Washington, D.C. to Carlos Vecchio and Gustavo Tarre, Juan Guaido's people, we said, with a group of other people, would you allow us to be inside? Because if we're inside the embassy, we have a better chance maybe of stopping them from handing it over. So that's how the whole thing kind of started.
And when you guys saw the situation, who came up with the concept of creating the Embassy Protectorate?
Well, that developed gradually. First people who were there were from Code Pink
and
Answer, and then we were invited in like 2 days into it, and we developed the concept of a collective, and it was built after the concept of colectivos in Venezuela.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
and,
so we were the Colectivo por la Paz. That's what we called ourselves.
That's right.
Okay.
Starting out with,
Or the Embassy Protection Collective.
Yeah.
And we had up to 70 people staying in the embassy at night. 70 people. And we were doing events. The first few weeks there was no problem. We could go in and out of the embassy.
In and out. What kind of communication relationship were you having with the actual staff of the embassy?
They were still there for the first few weeks. There were a few staff still there. Still a couple of ambassadors there. A couple of diplomats.
Did you guys
there.
approach them, or did they invite you?
No, we approached them, and they gave us permission. They said, "Oh, you can try."
They were actually a little unsure at first.
That's
they were
right.
like, "Well, how's this all going to actually
What
happen
is this?
and everything?" And so we were there. We were working there during the day, organizing the events, staying there at night, and so we got to know each other, and they got more and more comfortable with us.
They asked us, "Do you really think you can stop it from happening?" And my response was, "We don't know." When you do something like this, we've done a lot of different campaigns on various issues. Through Popular Resistance, we cover a lot of issues on popularresistance.org. And we, you start something, you don't know how people are going to react. You don't know how your allies are going to react. You don't know how your opponents are going to react, how the media will react, how the government will react, law enforcement, all unpredictable. So once you start something like this, you don't know where it's going to go, and so you have to be able to adjust as it proceeds.
Yeah, I was following through social media the whole process, and I just thought, whoa, what is going on there? Like, I thought it was it felt like it was at the same magnitude of the Dakota pipeline, because there were just so many activists. I had people calling me, you know what, I'm gathering my funds and I'm going. I just thought, but you don't even know what's out there. I don't care. I'm going to go help them preserve.
There were people from Florida. People from Florida came up. Yeah.
It was amazing because initially, so after the first week, we said, well, we need to get a lot of attention for this. How do we get attention? Well, Venezuela, the reason we kind of knew them was because they are very connected to social movements, and they often had events at their embassy that we would go to, movies and things like that, panels and stuff.
Lectures, whatever.
And so we said, well, can we start organizing kind of public events here? And they loved that idea. We had educational events, cultural events. We did national
We had like
webinars.
100 people coming in and out every night.
Just coming
for
to our
events.
events.
We did on Honduras, on Venezuela, on AFRICOM, Israel, Palestine, musical events, all sorts of, we had a fantastic event with a former CIA agent,
John
Kiriakou, and it was the night before we expected the police to come in. Now, I explain that if you want to know. And he was giving a lecture from regime change viewed from the inside. What it's like in the CIA to work on regime change.
That's a very unique perspective.
Very interesting perspective.
It
was the night before they were going to come take over the embassy, too.
Well, we didn't know. We
suspected.
We knew that. We never expected them to take it over because
That's
we were there legally with the permission of the elected government.
We had a key. We weren't breaking in.
For the United States government to enter that premises was in violation of international law. So all throughout, we hoped that the U.S. government would actually respect international law and not come in. But that night was the night before the OAS diplomats were officially leaving the country. And so after that, there would no longer be embassy staff inside there. And we didn't know how the U.S. government was going to react.
Right, so eventually you guys found yourselves in the Venezuelan embassy in Washington, D.C. with 0 staff.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
We would still be able to be in touch with them if something happened, and we were in touch with them as there were problems. At one point later in the process, we heard they were going to try to turn the electricity off. We contacted the staff. We hear they're trying to turn electricity off, and they called the
PEPCO,
the energy company, and the energy stayed on for the night. But the next day, they still turned it off anyway. So initially it was very easy going in and out. But then at a certain point, on April 30th, there was a coup attempt in Caracas.
Another one.
And Guaido and Leopoldo Lopez escaped from house arrest that day. He's a right-wing extremist down in Venezuela.
Well, he's the head of the party, the Popular Will Party that Juan Guaido
And he was under arrest for inciting violence that resulted in scores of people dying. So he was under arrest, but he escaped with Guaido for this coup. And we talked to people in Caracas that day, and they warned us this coup was happening. They weren't worried about it down there, but they suspected we might see repercussions in Georgetown and Washington, D.C. And that's when they began to surround our embassy, these right-wing extremist pro-coup mob.
That was when they really started pouring.
They came that morning, April 30th. They came that morning, and after that, everything changed.
Their arrival, because I saw that they were really violent through, again, these videos on social media.
Yes.
So do you guys know if they were organized, called, naturally, spontaneously arrived?
Didn't seem spontaneous.
Not
It
at
seemed
all.
very well organized. They had tons of money for tents and all sorts of equipment and food. It was like
they were staying at a hotel right up the street in
They
Georgetown.
were very
which
well
is
organized.
Not,
They were
that's
very well
very
organized.
expensive. They were taking shifts. They had walkie-talkies. They had fancy strobe lights that they were using to shine in our eyes, loud speaker systems to play loud music, and sirens, air horns. They had all this stuff that they were using.
And they're working very closely with
us.
and they're working very closely with the police.
Yeah.
If we had people on the outside who were supporting us, and if the pro-coup mob, somebody assaulted one of our supporters, our person who was the victim got arrested, not the person doing the assault.
And they broke into the embassy a couple of times, broke windows and doors and things like that. And when they broke in, the police did nothing about it. They would, we'd get them to remove them, but then they would give them a pat on the back and, nothing.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that they were well equipped. I mean, it's been reported. I mean, I think it was in 2017, the USA spent around $470 million into helping the opposition with Guaido. Now, it has happened before with Pink Code, Medea Benjamin, how she has mentioned that police officers here in Miami have turned their backs when the right-wingers attack the peaceful protesters. Mm-hmm. But what's really surprising is how they seem to know this, because, all right, the police officers decided to rather attack your people instead of the ones that were inciting the violence. But, what I'm curious is who let them know that they had this green light to just do all this violence?
My sense is that the State Department was probably working with Juan Guaido's people. And Juan Guaido's people came down to the embassy and, were present with the protesters, and, there was always this big, yay, he's here, that kind of thing. It was evident the very first day on April 30th, when these people showed up and they were very violent and threatening, we had decided ahead of time that if anything like that happened, we would anybody who was outside the embassy would stay out, people that were inside would stay in. We would just kind of shut it down until things calmed down, because we were really worried about them coming in and doing damage to the embassy. And
when they went to
violence and harm you guys.
When they took over the military attaché buildings, they did take things out.
They ripped things up.
Took things from the buildings, and so we were worried. We were really actually protecting the embassy.
Right.
That's what we were doing.
But we were basically stuck outside on the front, Kevin and I and some others, for a little over 20 hours. And people, our friends, would try to pass us water and food, and the police wouldn't allow them to do it. But there were two of the pro-coup people who were kind of inside that same area too. They wouldn't leave. They came in, but they wouldn't leave, and the police were literally handing them bags of food. And
the police didn't remove them.
And handing them things to drink. And they were keeping our people from giving us anything. Day one, they were doing
Right,
that.
so the police, they were sabotaging your access to food, supplies, and then they were feeding the opposition, quite literally.
Yeah.
Okay. So that is very unfortunate.
Yeah.
And so that kept on evolving and kept on building. I mean, this went on for
3 weeks almost.
3 weeks
Yeah.
of being under siege.
Yeah, could you guys describe what it was to those last days?
Well, last week, I guess would be a good place to start. We can.
How many were there left from the group originally?
Well, like Kevin said, we had at the peak, because we decided we needed as many people inside the embassy as possible to make it more politically difficult for the government to say, oh, we're going to remove these people. Mm-hmm. And we had children and all, a whole range of ages in there. And but then when they cut off our electricity, our food, we had to scale down in order to stay as long as we could. Our goal So under diplomatic law and practice, when two countries break off diplomatic relations, they find a third country to be a protecting power for their embassy during that period. Even if they're at war, they find a protecting power. And so the United States had asked Venezuela to allow Switzerland to be the protecting power for the embassy in Caracas. Mm-hmm. And Venezuela said, well, we want to find a country to be a protecting power for us. And they found Turkey was willing to do that finally. And so we had said, we're going to stay here until a mutual protecting power agreement is signed, and then we know the embassy is safe, then we'll leave the embassy. But that, the U.S. obviously didn't want that to happen.
And so
so we were trying to last as long as we could, because we were trying to give enough time for that
so we got down to 7 people. We thought that was enough to stay. Some of those were embedded media, people who were not really wanting to risk arrest. Others who, while we were there legally, we were, didn't know what the U.S. government was going to do. Would they break the law and arrest us? If they did, we would deal with that afterwards in the criminal defense or in a civil lawsuit. But we were there legally. They came on
May 13th.
May 13th with an eviction notice. It was an unusual eviction notice because there was no federal government official's name on it. There was no federal government agency on it.
No letterhead, nothing.
No
just
letterhead.
A plain 8.5 by 11 piece of paper.
And it said that Carlos Vecchio, who we knew was a former oil executive in Venezuela,
who fled to the U.S.
Who fled to the U.S. because he'd be prosecuted in Venezuela for inciting violence. And he fled to the United States and was pretending to be an ambassador. So
I wonder if he actually had any diplomatic background.
Yeah, no, he couldn't.
No experience?
He couldn't give a visa. I mean, he couldn't do anything.
He
Did he even work at customs?
No.
But his name was on there as saying we should leave.
Okay.
And we, no signature, no agency, and a fake ambassador tells us to leave. So they brought to the door of the police.
Of the embassy.
Of the embassy, our lawyer, Mara Varhaden Hilliard, from the Partnership for Civil Justice Fund, had negotiated with the police that we'd be in the lobby, and they'd come to that door.
Yes.
So we were in the lobby waiting for them. We weren't trying to hide or anything. And they broke the locks off the door, the chains off the door that had been put there by the embassy. Yeah. And they cut those through and opened the door. They didn't come in. They didn't violate the Vienna Convention.
They didn't cross the threshold.
They told us, would you voluntarily leave? We said, we will voluntarily leave when a mutual protecting power agreement is found for U.S. Embassy in Venezuela and the Venezuelan Embassy in the United States. We know that was being negotiated, so we were hopeful that could be resolved quickly, and we'd leave. Yes. And we would leave. So we talked to them for about an hour. We told the police that crossing that threshold violated international law. It would be very serious because that would mean embassies around the world would not be safe, including U.S. embassies, including U.S. embassy personnel. So by crossing that threshold and violating the law, they were putting U.S. personnel at risk around the world. We warned them about that.
Yeah.
We went on and on. We told the police that they should go back to their superiors and rethink entering the embassy.
Yeah.
Shockingly, the police left.
They shut the doors back up.
They shut the doors.
They put zip ties around them.
Plastic handcuffs.
But then they stationed police out front.
And they said they left, and so we figured, okay, good. They recognized they shouldn't break the law. We are here legally. We knew that. Our lawyer told us that. We knew we were here legally, and so we decided to stay.
And the next day, the Venezuelan United Nations ambassador Samuel Moncada did a press conference at the United Nations where he said these people are in the embassy with our permission, and if the U.S. goes in there, they're violating the Vienna Convention. And the United Nations, as well as over 120 countries, recognize Nicolas Maduro as the president of Venezuela.
And he's recognized under Venezuelan law. Maduro has never been out of office. He's always been in office.
Right, since he was elected.
Since he was reelected. And I was there for the election, so I know he was elected. I saw it happen. And it's an amazing election system they have down there. But so the next day, Reverend Jesse Jackson shows up.
Okay. And
he makes a talk to the media. We were up in the building, so we couldn't actually hear it. But they were doing the press conference. After the press conference was over, Code Pink had 3 bags of food they gave to Reverend Jackson. He carried those to the embassy windows, and we had a ability to throw a bag out and
with a rope, and
they'd put food
like
in
a medieval pulley system.
And then we'd pull the bag to the second
just
floor.
A bag and a rope.
And we'd pull to the second floor. We were able to do that a couple times.
We did get some food in
but they got better. The opposition, the pro-coup mob, started to cut the rope or hold the rope, and so
even the police cut the rope.
The police even helped so they blocked us from getting food. And so Jackson's there with the bag, with the food. We're up there. Should we throw the bag out? The pro-coup mob is there. Our allies are there. Jesse's in the middle. The cops are watching. It's a crazy scene. I decided to throw the bag out. And one of the coup guys wraps around the rope.
It's a big fight.
Big fight. They're fighting down. The police letting it happen, and they're fighting about. And we're filling the bag up with food, and we're trying to pull it up, and they're fighting with the rope, and the cops are just watching it. So it's like whoa! But in the end, we got 3 bags of food in.
We were so happy. We had not really been eating.
Well, we've been eating, but we eat
small meals
a lot of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
Mostly white bread and peanut butter, and so we actually got like some bananas and carrots, and we were just like, wow.
And so once that happened, I think then the police recalibrated. We don't know. We have to guess.
No idea.
We have to guess.
We were starting to get more of our people being outside support of us than there were pro-coup people. The media was starting to turn to cover us more.
And Jesse Jackson traditionally, when he breaks in through something, other people follow. Like you get Tulsi Gabbard or somebody else will come out and follow it.
So the U.S. decided that next morning. Basically, they called us. It was weird. He had his phone on because
which is unusual.
We weren't really without power. We weren't able to charge our phones. We had a couple of cars in the garage that we could use every once in a while. We didn't know how long we were going to be there, so we were trying to be very conservative.
So we kept our phone about 10 or 15% charge.
Right.
Okay. And so when we would charge the phone in the car, we could also cook food on the on the engine while it was
very
hot.
efficient.
While the engine was hot, we were cooking food.
We had cornmeal and water.
we were making breads.
But anyway, they called and they said, we're coming in to arrest you.
We have an arrest warrant.
And Kevin said, we're going to call our lawyer. And next thing we know, like they could have literally cut the zip ties on the front door and walked in. We looked out the window and there were over 100 law enforcement officers. Some of them were wearing combat gear with flak jackets and helmets, and they had a battering ram, literally a battering ram, that they battered in one of the doors with. We were sitting on the second floor, and we could just feel the whole building.
I had written them in writing that week and said that if they came in to arrest us, we would fight the arrest in court because we think we're here legally, but we would not resist arrest. We would not barricade ourselves. We would not hide.
Right. You guys had made it clear that should it come to it, you guys would peacefully walk out.
Right, and that's exactly what we did. We were sitting on the second floor conference room, and when we heard them come in, we said, "Hey, we're up here." They came up. There was 17 officers for a
little room,
for just
little conference room.
Okay.
And so then we were arrested, and that was at 8:30 in the morning. They could have taken us to the magistrate that day because the magistrate's at 1:30. That's where your first hearing is, your arraignment, where you plead not guilty. They could have done that day, but instead they took their time, took us to a police station. We sat there for hours. We ended up spending the night in jail.
And the whole next day. We didn't get out till the next evening.
And so and we got out. We're facing federal charges. Interfering with protective function, an unusual and rarely used charge. We didn't get charged with trespass or unlawful entry or anything like that.
Because we didn't.
They came up with this strange charge, and so we're in the midst of fighting that now.
When I was reading up on the flyer for the event that's going to be in Fort Lauderdale, the Unitarian Church, I was curious about why they included misdemeanors in there.
Well, it's a misdemeanor charge, but it's an unusual misdemeanor charge in that you can get fined up to $100,000 for a misdemeanor offense, which is amazing. 1 year in jail, up to 1 year, and a $100,000 fine. So it's a very
combined.
Yeah. Each of us is facing that.
Each of us individually. Each of the 4 people.
And each of us could pay a $100,000 fine.
And do you guys feel that they're going to try to really make an example of what you guys did?
We're worried about it because throughout this process, which has now been going on since last May, the government has shown no sign of wanting to negotiate any kind of fair resolution to this. They basically said, plead guilty and the judge will charge you.
We'll sentence you.
And we could throw in police time and we could throw in damage to the embassy, which we didn't do. They allowed it to happen. So, and the judge has not been very favorable to us in terms of things that we've asked for.
But we're very lucky that a defense committee formed.
Right.
And you can defendembassyprotectors.org is the website for the defense committee, and the defense committee made up a lot of excellent people, lawyers, activists, nice group, really good group of people. So it wasn't just the 4 of us against the United States. We actually have a committee now that's helping to raise money, helping to spread the word, and we really appreciate having that kind of support. It's an independent group from us. They do what they think is right, but they're doing a lot of good work for us.
And I understand that journalists like Max Blumenthal and peace activist Medea Benjamins were also charged with similar things. I mean,
Well,
how did some people get away?
There was just some strange charges. I mean,
because it feels like they wanted to round up as many people as possible, but then some slipped out.
When our people were arrested, and most of the people that were arrested there, who were outside, who were maybe trying to get food supplies to us, or just being there. One person was just trying to set up a tent. The pro-coup people had the building surrounded with tents, and we tried to put up one tent. And the police were just arresting our people for really nothing, when they were assaulted.
The head of Veterans for Peace tried to throw me a cucumber.
He just tossed it underhand.
And he was knocked down on the ground. His face was all bloodied. I was like,
72-year-old.
And he was arrested. And he was arrested too.
Trying to feed you guys.
Right, and so.
And a Code Pink woman, Ariel, was also arrested for throwing some bread up to us.
Yeah.
What they called throwing a missile or something.
Hurling a
missile at the building.
But so none of that. And then there were times when the pro-coup people would lie and tell the police that our people did something, and that's what happened to Max Blumenthal. One of the women accused him of doing something to her.
Some kind of assault.
Some sort of assault, and then they.
But she kept changing her story. It was not credible.
Well, the interesting thing is that they put out an arrest warrant for him. He had no idea that they had an arrest warrant for him in May. They decided not.
They showed up at his house, right?
Well, this didn't happen until October. They didn't use the arrest warrant. In fact, they rescinded it. They didn't have any evidence to support it. And then, like 2 or 3 days after he published an article that exposed that USAID was giving aid money that was meant for Central America to Juan Guaido to fund the opposition and fund the coup attempts, suddenly the police showed up at Max's door early one morning, and they had actually told the police that he was armed and dangerous, something that is really at risk to him, because if the police were assuming that he was an armed criminal, they could have acted rashly and he could have been hurt.
But these were bogus charges.
Right. They were meant to intimidate and harass.
And Max stood up to them along with his co-defendant Ben Rubenstein, and they were successful in defeating that. The government. It was very strange.
Had no evidence.
It was very strange. The defense lawyers asked for certain evidence, like call logs that were being made by the police, and suddenly the evidence disappeared.
They didn't have it.
Wow.
And so they decided to drop the charges instead of showing whatever evidence they lost or didn't have or hiding or whatever. So Max got his charges dropped. In our case, that doesn't look likely.
No.
And so we're probably going to trial in February.
In what circumstances did the judge decide that you guys can't mention the political context of all of this?
Well, we still have that hearing ahead of us. What's decided so far was a discovery request where we asked for certain kinds of documents and phone records and conversations and tapes, and they provide us a lot of useless stuff.
A whole dump.
800 plus videos of police video cam that was totally useless. But the stuff we wanted, they wouldn't give us, and the judge agreed that we didn't deserve it. And so we didn't get that. Now the fight with the prosecution is what will the jury be allowed to hear? And the prosecutors put in a motion, it's called a motion in limine, that would limit what the jury could hear. They don't want the jury to know that Maduro is president. They don't want the jury to know that Guaido is not president. They don't want the jury to know that we were there with the permission of the elected government of Venezuela. They don't want to know the jury about the Vienna Convention. They don't want the jury to know there's a mob sieging the embassy that was working with the police. They don't want the jury to know
any of that. We're not allowed to talk about...
But is that like a
the judge has not decided that's going to happen yet.
She did rule in our favor in the last one.
She'll decide that on the 29th.
Yeah, so
it seems counterproductive, almost insulting that neither Kevin nor Margaret nor their lawyers, nobody could have the chance to inform the public on the circumstances of the story. Is that usual? I mean,
well, this is a very unusual case. It's never happened before that people from the United States have gone into a foreign embassy to protect it, to uphold international law and prevent it being taken over by a pro-coup mob. And so that's never happened before.
Okay.
And so we're dealing with stuff that's new. And international law is very difficult in U.S. courts. U.S. courts, even though we've signed these treaties, and treaties are respected under U.S. law, you don't really use international law in U.S. courtrooms. And there's also very strange rules in the United States that the president gets to decide who's recognized as a president of another country. And so if Donald Trump says Mickey Mouse is president, then Mickey Mouse is president. In that courtroom, Mickey Mouse will be president, and Donald Duck will be his ambassador. And that's the reality of U.S. law. And so right now, under U.S. law, Trump...
Is this pretty unique, or do other nations have this as well?
I don't know about other nations.
I don't know about that. I just know it's not unique in the United States, but it's been the law for decades. But Trump essentially says Guaido is president. Then in that courtroom, Guaido is president. You don't mention Maduro is really the president. So it's a very Alice in Wonderland kind of situation. It's kind of a fantasy. We're going to assume everything that makes sure you're guilty before the trial even happens.
But it's not unusual in trials for the judges to limit what can be said.
That's right.
And try to keep out any kind of contextual information. That's why there's so much injustice in our legal system.
They try to do. They claim what's relevant and what's not relevant, and there's debates between prosecutors and lawyers, defense lawyers, about what those are.
So we still have a big fight.
And so on January 29th, we'll have a hearing that we will make our lawyers will make these arguments, and the prosecutors will make their arguments, and the judge. Judge Howell, who's the chief judge of the U.S. District Court for Washington, D.C., she'll make the decision on what the jury's allowed to hear.
Right. And on January 22nd, the Embassy Defense Protection Committee, or Embassy Protectors Defense Committee, is organizing a call-in day to the prosecutor's office, encouraging people to call and tell her to drop the charges against us.
The details are on defendembassyprotectors.org.
Good. So then, essentially, to help this case, we would need to more and more people to know about the circumstances, because the fact that they want to keep the jury ignorant of the surrounding means that we need to do the opposite. We need to inform as many people as possible about the magnitude and importance and injustice of this highly political case.
Right. Yeah, to me, it's like, to say that politics are going to be out of the courtroom, it's impossible, because the entire case is political, and making the assumption that Juan Guaido is the president is a completely political decision, but a dangerously political decision, because the United States is imposing unilateral economic coercive measures against Venezuela that are responsible for the deaths of tens of thousands of Venezuelans, that are keeping Venezuelans from getting the medications that they need. This is the context of what all of this is happening in, and it needs to be exposed, because if people really understood what was happening, what the U.S. is trying to do to a sovereign country of Venezuela, people, I hope, would be outraged and would say, no, we're not okay with the United States doing that. And the case is not really so much about us, but it's about U.S. imperialism and a level to which the United States will violate international law and act in this rogue and dangerous way that's causing the deaths. We might as well be attacking Venezuela,
Yeah, but I would also add that besides acting in a pretty arrogant fashion in South America, it's also very disturbing, considering you guys are both American citizens, and you were acting as activists because you had a political opinion. Your political opinion meant that you recognized that the embassy needed to be protected. You were completely peaceful. You acted according to your conscience as co-directors of popularresistance.org. And so that's why I think that it's really important that people understand that this isn't just a position on foreign policy. This is something that affects us. And if somebody is arrested or fined or made an example, then that, again, it's another dangerous precedent that people will then start being intimidated, because then maybe the next time a peace activist would think twice.
Exactly.
Because you don't want to be burdened then with $100,000.
We were exercising our political rights
Yeah.
under the Constitution, our right to freedom of speech, and freedom of press, because we had media in there trying to report what was going on. We appreciate you covering this, because it's amazing that the corporate media doesn't cover it. This was a made-for-TV event. Every day, people. I didn't know how much people were watching it when we were in there, but we've been on a speaking tour to raise money for our defense, and also to educate people about this, to raise consciousness about what's happening in Venezuela and what this coup is about. And so when we go around the country, we're amazed at how people actually were following, like you said, you were following it on social media.
Yeah.
And we discovered that people in Latin America were covering it, watching it very closely. People told us that it totally changed the debate in Venezuela. People looked at people of the United States differently. Wow, they put their bodies on the line for us.
Because so many hundreds of people came out. I mean, it was a huge effort.
A huge effort. There were 70 inside, but there were 1,000 outside. And so a lot of people came to support this.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me that people in Venezuela would admire that kind of courage. And also, I think that if we let other countries know that our government is more than willing, should the circumstances require it, to seize embassies like that and just behave with such impunity, breaking the law, I think it also damages our image.
It also puts potential risk at all of our embassies.
Yes.
If it's the law of the jungle out there,
it's no longer a sacred place.
Rather than the Vienna Convention,
it's no longer inviolable.
It's not safe, and that's not good for our embassies.
Well, look at what's happening in Bolivia right now with the Mexican embassy in Bolivia, where they've been allowing some of the Mas Party leaders to stay there, to be safe, to have asylum, and the Bolivian coup government is surrounding it. It's basically under siege with police out there. Or look at what happened in Iraq with, the United States bombed these Iraqi militias and killed 25 of them and wounded over 50, and then they responded by breaking into the U.S. embassy. Basically, the United States has told the world, the Vienna Convention doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want to these embassies, and that's new.
So this is a big issue. It's not just about us, as Margaret said. It's a big issue about foreign policy, about our constitutional rights to correct our government when it's doing something wrong.
Yeah.
It's about justice in the court system. It affects so much. So, as I said, we really appreciate you covering it, and we hope people come out and be part of the events in Florida. But we're doing a Northeast tour. You can read about it on embassyprotectors.org.
Okay. Yeah, and one last question then. Has the last incident, because I understand there's a background. I mean, you both ran for Senate with the Green Party, right?
Right. Yep.
Now, has this in any way damaged your fighter spirit for activism?
The opposite.
This is more like emboldening, right?
Yeah, and that was the thing. When they cut off our power, they cut off our food, our water, our solidarity with the Venezuelans became so much stronger because the U.S. has done the same thing to them. And just seeing just the levels of what the U.S. government will do makes us recognize how important it is for us to do what we can to seek justice and peace in the world.
Right, so as activists, you're not intimidated, you just want to continue fighting even more.
We're planning our next campaign as we speak.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for just explaining everything. I feel that if anybody who watches the video will definitely get your side of the story and can't help but feel solidarity with this.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
And good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.